Daniel never believed in ghosts. Not until he moved into that old house on Maple Street. The divorce had left him broken in ways he didn't want to admit. When his wife left, she took everything except his laptop and a suitcase of clothes. He needed a fresh start, somewhere cheap, somewhere quiet. The Victorian house seemed perfect when he first saw it. Sure, it was old. The paint was peeling in places and the stairs creaked like they were complaining about every step. But it had character, and the rent was almost too good to be true. Mrs. Chen, the landlady, was a small woman in her 70s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She showed him around with quick, nervous movements like she wanted to finish the tour as fast as possible. Last tenant didn't stay long, she mentioned casually while unlocking the bedroom door. Only 3 months. Daniel didn't think much of it at the time. People move all the time. Maybe they got a better job offer. Maybe they didn't like the neighborhood. He signed the lease that same afternoon. The first 2 nights were normal. Well, as normal as sleeping alone in a strange house can be. The place settled and groaned the way old houses do. Pipes knocked. Floorboards shifted. Nothing unusual. Daniel unpacked his boxes slowly, setting up his computer in the small office downstairs, hanging his few pieces of clothing in the bedroom closet. It was the 3rd night when everything changed. He'd gone to bed around 11, exhausted from unpacking. Sleep came quickly, pulling him down into darkness, but something woke him. Not a noise exactly. More like a feeling. That strange sensation you get when you know someone is watching you. Daniel's eyes opened slowly. The room was dark except for a strip of moonlight coming through the gap in the curtains. His heart was beating faster than normal, though he couldn't say why. Then he saw her. A woman was sitting on the edge of his bed. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. The moonlight caught her profile, casting half her face in silver light. She wore an old-fashioned dress, something from decades ago with buttons running up the front. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders in soft waves, but it was her smile that froze him completely. She was looking right at him, smiling like she knew him. Not the polite smile you give a stranger. This was intimate, familiar. The kind of smile someone gives when they know all your secrets and find them amusing. Daniel wanted to scream. He wanted to jump out of bed and run, but his body wouldn't move. He just lay there staring at her as she stared back with that knowing smile. Time seemed to stop. Seconds felt like hours. His mind raced through explanations. Someone broke in. He was dreaming. He was having some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Nothing made sense. Finally, he managed to move his arm. His hand fumbled for the lamp on the nightstand. His fingers found the switch and clicked it on. Light flooded the room. She was gone. Daniel sat up so fast his head spun. He looked around wildly. The bedroom door was still closed. The window was shut and locked. There was nowhere she could have gone. But there was something else. Something that made his skin crawl. The blanket where she'd been sitting was wrinkled. The edge of the mattress was still compressed as if someone had just stood up from it. He didn't sleep the rest of that night. He sat with his back against the headboard, every light in the room turned on, watching the door. When morning finally came, pale and gray through the windows, he felt foolish. Obviously, he'd been dreaming. The stress of the divorce, the move, sleeping in a strange place. His mind had played tricks on him. That's what he told himself anyway. He went about his day trying to forget. He made coffee. He answered work emails. He went to the grocery store and bought food for the week. Everything normal. Everything fine. By evening, he'd almost convinced himself it had been nothing. But when bedtime came, anxiety crept back in. He kept the lamp on, telling himself it was just for one more night. Just until he felt more settled. He fell asleep with the light on, and woke up in darkness. Someone had turned off the lamp. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He was too afraid to move, too afraid to open his eyes fully, but he could feel it again. That presence, that absolute certainty that he wasn't alone. He opened his eyes. She was there again, same spot, same position, same smile. This time he could see her more clearly. She couldn't have been more than 35, with dark eyes that seemed to absorb the moonlight rather than reflect it. Her skin was pale, almost luminous. The dress she wore had small pearl buttons, and now he could see it was deep blue or maybe black. It was hard to tell in the dim light. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way you might study a painting in a museum. Her smile widened just a fraction, Daniel found his voice. "Who are you?" She didn't answer. Didn't move. Just kept smiling. "What do you want?" His voice shook, still nothing. But her eyes. God, her eyes seemed to look right through him, into him, reading things he didn't even know about himself. He reached for the lamp again, moving slowly this time, not wanting to startle her. Or maybe not wanting to startle himself. The click seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Light gone. But this time, Daniel noticed something else. A smell lingered in the air. Perfume. Something old-fashioned and floral like lavender and roses. The scent his grandmother used to wear. He got out of bed and checked everything. The door was locked from the inside. The windows were secure. The closet was empty except for his clothes. There was no rational explanation. Sleep was impossible after that. He went downstairs and made coffee at 4 a.m, sitting at the kitchen table as dawn slowly brightened the sky. His hands shook as he held the mug. By the time the sun was fully up, he'd made a decision. He was going to talk to Mrs. Chen. There had to be something she wasn't telling him. He found her number and called. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Mrs. Chen, it's Daniel. You're a tenant on Maple Street. I need to ask you something about the house." There was a long pause. "What kind of something?" "The last tenant." "Why did they really leave?" Another pause, longer this time. He could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "They found another place," she said finally. "Better location. Mrs. Chen, please. I need to know the truth. Has anyone ever seen anything strange in this house? Particularly in the bedroom?" The silence that followed told him everything. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Just keep your door locked at night, and don't engage with anything you see. Sometimes old houses have memories. That's all." "Memories? What does that mean?" "I have to go. The rent is due on the 1st. She hung up. Daniel stared at his phone. Memories. What kind of answer was that? He tried to work, but concentration was impossible. His mind kept returning to that smile. That knowing, possessive smile. Like she owned something of his. Like she'd already claimed some part of him that he didn't even know he could lose. That afternoon, he did something he never thought he'd do. He went to the library and asked for old newspapers. If something happened in that house, there might be a record of it. The librarian, a young guy with thick glasses, helped him access the archives. "What year are you looking for?" "I don't know. Maybe the 80s? 90s? They started searching. It took almost 2 hours, scrolling through digitized newspaper pages, before Daniel found it. November 1987. A small article on page 6. Local woman found dead in home. His blood ran cold as he read. A woman named Vera Castellan, age 34, had been found in the bedroom of the house on Maple Street. The death was ruled a suicide. There were no signs of struggle. No note was found. The article mentioned she'd been going through a difficult time, but didn't specify what kind. There was a picture with the article. A small grainy photograph. It was her. The woman from his bedroom. Same dark hair. Same intense eyes. The photograph had been taken at some social event, and even in the poor print quality, Daniel could see it. That smile. That exact same smile. His hands trembled as he held the printout. This was impossible. Ghosts weren't real. But he'd seen her. Twice. And now he knew her name. Vera. That night, Daniel considered leaving. He could pack his things right now. Break the lease, lose the deposit. It didn't matter. But something stopped him. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Or maybe somewhere deep down, there was a part of him that wanted to see her again. He went to bed with every light in the house turned on, and waited. Daniel stopped using sleeping pills after the 3rd night. He needed to be alert, aware. If Vera was going to appear again, he wanted to be ready. She came every night after that, always at exactly 3:17 in the morning. Daniel started setting his alarm for 3:15 just to be prepared. He'd wake up, heart already racing, and wait in the darkness. 2 minutes later, like clockwork, he'd feel the temperature drop. Then he'd sense her presence before he saw her. And there she'd be, sitting on the edge of his bed, watching him with that smile. The first week was terrifying. Daniel would lie frozen, barely breathing until she disappeared. He tried talking to her, asking questions, but she never responded. She just sat there, studying him with those dark, knowing eyes. But fear has a strange way of fading when something becomes routine. By the second week, Daniel found himself less terrified and more curious. Who was this woman? What did she want? And why him? He spent his days researching. The library became his second home. He learned everything he could about Vera Castellan. She'd moved to town in 1985 with her boyfriend. They'd rented the house on Maple Street together. Neighbors remembered them as a quiet couple who kept to themselves. Then 2 years later, Vera was found alone in the bedroom. Her boyfriend had left town shortly after her passing. No one seemed to know where he went. The more Daniel learned, the more questions he had. The newspaper called it a suicide, but there was something off about the whole story. Why would someone end their life in such a way with no warning? And why did her boyfriend leave so quickly? He found Vera's grave in the old cemetery on the edge of town. It was a small headstone, simple and plain. Someone had left flowers there recently. They were fresh, maybe only a few days old. Daniel wondered who still remembered her after all these years. Standing there in the cold autumn wind, looking at her name carved in stone, Daniel felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just a ghost story. This was a person. Vera had been real. She'd had dreams, fears, hopes, and now she was trapped somehow, appearing night after night in the place where she'd spent her final moments. That night, when she appeared, Daniel did something different. Instead of lying silent and afraid, he sat up slowly. "I know who you are," he said quietly. "Your name is Vera." For the first time, she reacted. Her head tilted slightly and her smile changed. It became less mysterious, more sad. "I found your grave today," Daniel continued. "Someone left you flowers. Pink roses." She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap. Daniel noticed her fingers were moving slightly, like she was trying to do something but couldn't quite manage it. "I don't know why you're here," he said, "or what you want, but I'm listening. If you can find a way to tell me, I'll listen." She looked up at him then, and for just a moment her expression changed completely. The smile vanished. In its place was something raw and desperate. Pain, loneliness, need. It lasted only a second before the smile returned, but Daniel had seen it. She wasn't haunting him out of malice. She was trapped, and she was suffering. After that night, something changed between them. Vera still appeared at 3:17 every morning, but the atmosphere was different, less threatening, almost companionable in a strange way. Daniel started talking to her during these visits. He'd tell her about his day, about the work he was doing, about the divorce that had brought him to this town. He didn't know if she could understand him, but it felt good to talk to someone, even a ghost who couldn't answer back. His friends started to notice changes in him. He'd stopped answering their calls. His work emails became shorter, less engaged. When his buddy Ryan finally got through to him, the concern in his voice was obvious. "Man, you sound different. You okay?" "I'm fine," Daniel said, though he wasn't sure that was true anymore. "You sure about that house? Maybe you should come stay with me for a while. Get out of there." "No, I'm good, really." But he wasn't good. His sleep schedule was destroyed. He'd wake at 3:17, spend an hour with Vera, then lie awake until dawn. During the day, he'd doze off at random times. His work started to suffer. Clients complained about missed deadlines. The strange thing was, Daniel didn't really care. His old life, his old problems, they all seemed distant now, unimportant. The only thing that felt real was those nights with Vera. He started noticing other things too. Sometimes during the day, he'd catch a glimpse of her reflection in a mirror, or he'd walk into a room and smell that lavender perfume. Once he found his sketchbook open to a page he didn't remember drawing. It was a portrait of a woman, Vera's face drawn in his handwriting but somehow not in his style. That scared him more than the nightly visits. She was appearing during the day now, getting stronger, or maybe he was getting weaker. Mrs. Chen called one afternoon asking about the rent. When Daniel mentioned he might stay another year, she was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe that's not a good idea," she said finally. "Why not? That house. It's not meant for long-term living." "What does that mean?" "Just think about it, Daniel, please." But he didn't want to think about it. He didn't want to leave. Where would he go? Back to his old life? To the emptiness that had swallowed him after the divorce? At least here he had company. At least here, he wasn't alone. It was around this time that Daniel discovered he could sense Vera even when she wasn't visible. He'd feel a cold spot in a room and know she was there. Or he'd suddenly smell her perfume and turn around expecting to see her. One evening he was making dinner when he felt her presence behind him. He turned but saw nothing. Yet the feeling remained, strong, insistent. "Vera?" he said to the empty kitchen. The cabinet door beside him slowly opened on its own. Daniel's heart raced, but not from fear, from excitement. She was communicating, actually trying to make contact beyond just appearing at night. "You can move things?" he asked. The door closed, then opened again. That's incredible." Over the next few days, they developed a simple system. 1 tap for yes, 2 taps for no. Vera would knock on walls or furniture to answer his questions. It was slow, frustrating communication, but it was something. "Are you trapped here?" Daniel asked one night. 1 knock. "Yes." "Because of how you passed?" 1 knock. "Was it really suicide?" Long pause. Then 2 knocks. No, Daniel's blood ran cold. "Someone hurt you?" 1 knock. "Your boyfriend?" 1 knock. There it was. The truth that had been hidden for almost 40 years. Vera hadn't taken her own life. Someone had made it look that way, and that person had walked free all these years. "Is he still alive?" Daniel asked, though he dreaded the answer. 1 knock. "Yes." "Is he still in town?" 1 knock. Daniel sat back, his mind racing. Vera's boyfriend was still here, somewhere in this small town, living his life while she was trapped in this house, unable to move on, unable to rest. "You want justice?" Daniel said. It wasn't a question. 1 knock. "Yes." And there was something else in that knock, something desperate and hungry and just a little bit dangerous. Daniel should have been afraid. He should have recognized the warning signs. But all he felt was determination. If Vera needed help, he would help her. If she needed justice, he would find a way to give it to her. He didn't notice how his thoughts were changing, how his priorities were shifting, how more and more of his mind was occupied with Vera's story, Vera's pain, Vera's needs. He didn't notice because it felt natural. It felt right. That night after their communication session, Vera appeared at her usual time. But something was different. She stood up from the bed, something she'd never done before. She walked closer to him, closer than she'd ever been. Daniel could see her more clearly now. The details of her face, the texture of her dress, the way her hair caught the moonlight. She was beautiful in a heartbreaking way. She reached out her hand, palm up, as if offering something or asking for something. Her smile had changed again. It wasn't mysterious anymore. It wasn't sad. It was grateful and possessive. Daniel reached out his own hand, knowing somewhere deep down that this was a mistake, that he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross. But he reached out anyway. Their hands didn't quite touch, couldn't touch. But the air between them grew cold, and Daniel felt something pass between them. An understanding, an agreement he hadn't meant to make. When he pulled his hand back, Vera's smile was wider than he'd ever seen it. She owned a piece of him now. He just didn't know how much yet. The dream started after that night. Daniel would fall asleep and find himself living someone else's life. Vera's life. He saw through her eyes, felt what she felt, lived her memories as if they were his own. He saw her arriving in town on a gray autumn day, much like this one, saw her boyfriend carrying boxes into the house on Maple Street, promising this was their fresh start, saw their early days together when things were still good. But then the memories grew darker. He felt her boyfriend's grip tightening, his jealousy growing, simple questions about where she'd been, who she'd talked to. At first it seemed like concern, love, but it twisted into something else, control, possession. Daniel woke from these dreams gasping, his heart racing. But the worst part was when he woke up, the memories didn't fully leave. They lingered in his mind like they'd always been there. Vera's past was becoming mixed with his own. He started losing time during the day. He'd be sitting at his computer and suddenly realize an hour had passed with no memory of it, or he'd find himself standing in a room with no idea how he got there. His friend Ryan showed up unannounced one afternoon, concern written all over his face. "Daniel, man, you look terrible. When's the last time you ate?" Daniel looked down at himself, surprised. His clothes hung loose on his frame. He couldn't remember his last real meal. "I've been busy," he said. "Busy with what?" "Your clients are worried. You missed 3 deadlines last week. Had it been a week?" Daniel had lost track of time. Days blurred together, marked only by Vera's visits at 3:17, I'm handling something, Daniel said. Something important. More important than your livelihood? Than your health? Ryan grabbed his shoulders. Listen to me. Whatever's going on with you, it's not normal. You need help. Daniel pulled away. You wouldn't understand. Then explain it to me, but how could he? How could he explain that he was helping a woman who'd been gone for decades? That he was the only person who knew the truth about what happened to her? That he might be the only chance she had for peace? Ryan left eventually, frustrated and worried. Daniel felt bad about it, but not bad enough to change anything. Vera needed him. That was what mattered. He started researching Vera's old boyfriend. It took some digging, but he finally found him. Robert Chen. The name made Daniel's stomach drop. Chen, like his landlady. He called Mrs. Chen immediately. Your husband, Daniel said when she answered. His name is Robert? The silence on the other end was deafening. You know, Daniel continued, you've always known what happened in that house. I don't know what you're talking about. Her voice shook. Vera didn't take her own life. Your husband was responsible, and you've been covering it up all these years. Stop, Mrs. Chen said. Please stop. Why do you keep renting out the house? What are you trying to do? I'm trying to help her. The words burst out of her. Vera was my sister. She was my little sister, and I failed her. I knew Robert was hurting her, and I did nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that she was an adult, that she could handle it, and then she was gone. Daniel sat down heavily. Sisters. That explained the fresh flowers on the grave. The house should have been torn down. Mrs. Chen continued, her voice breaking. But I couldn't do it. She's there. I can feel her there. And I thought if someone else lived there, someone who could help her, maybe she could finally rest. Maybe I could finally forgive myself. What happened that night? Daniel asked. I don't know the details. Robert came to me the next morning. Said Vera was gone, said she'd been depressed and he'd found her. The police believed him. Everyone believed him. He was so convincing. But I knew. I knew in my heart what he'd done. And I said nothing. I've said nothing for 38 years. Where is he now? Daniel, please. Leave this alone. It won't bring her back. It'll only destroy whatever life Robert has left, and it'll destroy me too. She deserves justice. And what about me? Don't I deserve peace? I've carried this guilt every day. Kept that house. Left flowers every week. I've given everything to her memory. Everything except the truth. Mrs. Chen hung up. That night, Vera appeared angrier than Daniel had ever seen her. Her presence felt different, heavier, more oppressive. The temperature in the room dropped so low he could see his breath. She stood at the foot of his bed, and for the first time she spoke. Her voice was like wind through dead leaves, barely there but unmistakable. He's close. Daniel's voice came out in a whisper. I know who he is. Make him pay. Her words dripped with decades of rage. I will. I promise. Let me help you. She moved closer. Let me show you how. How? Let me in. She reached out both hands this time. Completely. Warning bells rang in Daniel's mind, but they were distant, muffled. Most of him wanted to say yes. Wanted to give her what she needed. Wanted to help her finally, truly. If I do that, he said slowly, what happens to me? Her smile returned. That possessive smile he'd first seen weeks ago. We become one. My memories. My strength. My purpose. You'll finally understand everything. And then we make him confess. We make the world know what he did. It sounded reasonable. It sounded right. Daniel found himself nodding. Yes, he said. Okay. Vera's smile widened until it was almost inhuman. Go to where I died. At 3:17 tomorrow. Bring something sharp. Draw blood where my blood was spilled. Speak my name 3 times, and I'll come through. The next day passed in a haze. Daniel barely remembered it. He was operating on autopilot, his mind focused entirely on what would happen that night. He found a small knife in the kitchen. At 3:15, he stood in the center of his bedroom, right where Vera's body had been found all those years ago. His hands shook as he held the knife. Some part of him, buried deep, was screaming that this was wrong, but that voice was so faint now, drowned out by Vera's needs, Vera's pain, Vera's hunger for justice. At exactly 3:17, he pressed the knife to his palm. The moment blood welled up, he felt her. Not just near him, but in him. Her presence crashed into his mind like a wave, bringing with it a flood of memories, emotions, sensations that weren't his own. He saw his own face through her eyes, saw the moment Robert's hands closed around her throat, felt the terror, the betrayal, the desperate struggle for air that wouldn't come, felt his life ending and the horrible realization that no one would save him, no one would know, felt the decades that followed. Trapped, conscious, unable to move on, watching the house empty and fill, watching tenants come and go, learning slowly, painfully, how to make himself visible, how to reach out, how to touch the physical world. Felt the hunger growing, not for food or warmth but for life itself, for a body that could move, for hands that could act, for a voice that could accuse. Daniel dropped the knife, staggering backward. His mind was fracturing, splitting between his own thoughts and hers. He couldn't tell where he ended and she began. "Stop," he gasped. This is too much, but Vera wasn't stopping. She was pouring herself into him, filling every corner of his consciousness. He could feel his own personality being pushed aside, compressed, diminished. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. "Please." And then, like a light switch flipping, it stopped. Daniel knelt on the floor, breathing hard. His mind felt crowded, like there were two people trying to occupy one brain. He looked up at the mirror across the room. His reflection stared back, but the expression on his face wasn't one he'd ever made before. The smile curling his lips wasn't his, it was hers. "Hello, Robert," Daniel heard himself say in a voice that was his but also wasn't. Time to tell the truth. Daniel spent the next 3 days fighting for control of his own body. It was like being a passenger in a car he used to drive. He could see through his eyes, hear through his ears, but his hands, his voice, his movements, they belonged to Vera now. Or they mostly did. Sometimes he could push through, reclaim control for a few minutes. But it was getting harder each time. Vera used his body to search through his belongings, to use his computer, to access his bank accounts. She was learning how the modern world worked, adapting quickly to technology that hadn't existed in her time. During the moments when Daniel could surface, he tried to understand what was happening. In the bathroom mirror, he'd stare at his own face, seeing her expressions playing across his features. Sometimes his eyes looked different, darker, ancient. He found old journals hidden in the basement. Not his journals. The journals of previous tenants. There were 4 of them dating back years. The first was from 2015. A woman named Jennifer had lived in the house for 2 months. Her early entries were normal, talking about her new job, her plans to paint the bedroom. Then the entries changed. She wrote about seeing a woman in old-fashioned clothes, about feeling watched, about dreams that weren't her own. The final entry was barely legible. "She wants in. I can't let her. Have to leave. Have to leave now." The second journal was from 2018. A college student named Tom. Same pattern. Normal entries, then increasing paranoia, then descriptions of Vera. His last entry was worse. "I almost did it. Almost let her in. Almost cut my hand like she asked. I'm leaving everything behind. Better to lose my security deposit than lose myself." The third and fourth journals told similar stories. People who'd felt Vera's pull, started the process of letting her in, then fled before completing it. Daniel was the first one who'd actually gone through with it. And now he understood why the others had run. Vera wasn't trying to possess him temporarily. She was trying to replace him, to push his consciousness out entirely and take over his body permanently. Once she had full control, she'd live again, and Daniel would simply cease to exist. He tried to tell someone, to ask for help, but Vera controlled his voice. When Ryan called again, Daniel managed to answer, but the words that came out weren't his own. "Ryan, everything's fine. I'm working on a big project. Can't talk now." His mouth smiled without his permission. "You sound weird, man. Are you sure you're okay?" "Perfect. Never better." The cheerfulness in his voice was wrong, artificial. After the call ended, Daniel felt Vera's satisfaction radiating through their shared consciousness. She was getting stronger, more confident. Soon she wouldn't need to fight for control at all. That night, during one of his brief moments of control, Daniel managed to search his computer for information about Robert Chen. He found an address across town. A nice house in a good neighborhood. Robert was 72 now, retired, apparently living a comfortable life. Vera surfaced, taking control again. Through their shared consciousness, Daniel felt her rage building as she stared at Robert's address on the screen. Tomorrow, she made Daniel's voice say. Tomorrow we go see him. Daniel tried to resist, to pull back, but he was too weak now. The best he could do was observe, trapped inside his own skull as Vera made plans with his hands, drove his car with his feet. The next morning, Vera dressed Daniel's body in clean clothes, combed his hair, made him look presentable. Daniel watched from inside, screaming silently as she drove across town. Robert Chen's house was modest but well-maintained. A small garden in front, wind chimes hanging from the porch. It looked like the home of someone at peace. Vera rang the doorbell using Daniel's hand. An old man answered. He was thin with white hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked kind, grandfatherly, nothing like the villain in Vera's memories. Can I help you? Robert asked. You don't recognize me? Vera used Daniel's voice, but there was something underneath it now. A second voice, feminine and cold. Robert's face went pale. Who are you? Look closer. Vera made Daniel step forward into the sunlight. Look at my eyes. Robert stared, and Daniel saw the exact moment recognition hit. Not recognition of Daniel, but recognition of something in his expression. Something old and familiar and terrifying. No, Robert whispered. That's impossible. You thought I was gone. You thought you were free. The words came out harsh, wrong. But I never left, Robert. I've been waiting. And now I have hands again. I have a voice again. Robert tried to close the door, but Vera was faster. She shoved Daniel's body forward, pushing into the house. You can't be here, Robert said, backing away. Please, it was an accident. I didn't mean to. You have to believe me. An accident? You choked the life out of me and staged it to look like suicide. What part of that was an accident? Inside their shared consciousness, Daniel felt Vera's memories surging. The argument that last night, Robert accusing her of wanting to leave him, his hands around her throat, her vision darkening, the final terror as she realized he wasn't going to stop. But Daniel also felt something else, something Vera didn't want him to see. Other memories, older ones. Vera provoking arguments, Vera manipulating situations, Vera pushing Robert's buttons deliberately, testing how far she could push him before he snapped. She hadn't deserved what happened to her. Nothing justified that, but she hadn't been innocent either. Their relationship had been toxic long before that final night. I'll confess, Robert said, trembling. I'll tell the police everything. Just please leave me alone. Confess? Vera laughed with Daniel's voice. You think confession is enough? You think justice is enough? What else do you want? I want your life, the way you took mine. Daniel felt Vera's intentions then clear and sharp. She was going to use his body to hurt Robert, maybe even finish what she felt Robert had started all those years ago. No. The word came from deep inside Daniel's consciousness. He'd been passive too long, letting Vera take more and more control. But this was wrong. This wasn't justice. This was revenge. And he wouldn't let his body be used for it. He pushed back. It was like trying to swim through concrete, but he pushed. Pushed against Vera's presence. Pushed toward the surface of his own mind. He felt her surprise, then her anger. Don't fight me. Vera's thoughts crashed into his. You promised to help. Not like this, Daniel thought back. His right hand twitched. His own hand under his own control for just a moment. Then Vera crushed him back down. But that moment had been enough. Robert had seen it. The struggle playing out across Daniel's face. You're possessed, Robert said, understanding dawning. She's inside you. I let her in, Daniel managed to say with his own voice before Vera took control again. She told me you were guilty. She didn't tell me she was turning me into her puppet. Get out, Vera snarled through Daniel's mouth. Get out of this conversation. This body is mine now. No, Daniel fought harder. It's not, and it never will be. The battle inside his men,